Okay, so Nintendo Switch Sports was just released, and I have played the game, and honestly, Nintendo should be ashamed. Nintendo Switch Sports makes Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival look amazing. Nintendo Switch Sports makes Chibi Robo Ziplash look like it could have won Game of the Year. This game just ain't too good. And so in this video, I'll be talking about why you shouldn't waste your money on Nintendo Switch Sports. Let's begin. The very first thing about Nintendo Switch Sports that annoyed me when I booted up the game wasn't the horrible looking sportsmates, or the fact that Wuhu Island was replaced with a soulless sports park. What annoyed me was the lack of sports. Nintendo Switch Sports currently has 5 sports in the game, and I say 5 because badminton and tennis are basically the exact same sport. Badminton is essentially just a slower, more boring version of tennis. I'm sorry if that offended any badminton players, but it's the truth. I don't understand how Wii Sports Resort, a game published in 2009, had 12 sports, and Nintendo Switch Sports has half of that. How? And I swear, if someone in the comments says, well, developing games on the Wii was really cheap, and developing HD games in 2022 is really expensive, which is why there are only 6 sports, I am going to freak out. Nintendo are worth $37 billion. They can afford to make HD games that have a lot of content. What makes this even more disappointing though, is that there is a game releasing on the Switch in May, titled Instant Sports Plus. Now, Instant Sports Plus is being developed by a team of 22 developers who go by the name of Breakfast. Now, Instant Sports Plus is going to have 15 sports, 3 times the amount of sports in Nintendo Switch Sports. You cannot tell me that Nintendo Switch Sports should have that little content. And yes, I know, Instant Sports Plus isn't anywhere near as visually appealing as Nintendo Switch Sports, but you get the point I'm making. A team of 22 developers should not be making a rip-off Nintendo Switch Sports that has more content than the game they're ripping off, especially when the game they're ripping off is made by Nintendo, and Nintendo have so much more money and resources than them. Now, Nintendo Switch Sports having a lack of content is one thing, but the game isn't even releasing in a complete state. Golf is releasing as a free DLC sport and is coming later in 2022. I don't understand why Nintendo don't just wait until the game is complete before they release it. That way, in advertisements for the game, they could show off golf as a sport that is actually going to be in the game from day one, instead of giving people a reason to pick up the game later, as there's no real reason to pick up the game on release date, as you can just wait a few months and get the game when it's actually going to have more content. On another note of the game not being complete, in soccer you can only use the leg strap in the shootout mode. You can't use it in the other 2 modes. Why? This literally makes no sense at all. We have to wait until the end of the year to be able to use the leg strap in normal matches of soccer. It's honestly pathetic, and I don't understand why this is happening. Another complaint I have for the game is that everything just feels very soulless. Now, Wii Sports had barely any personality, but that was the game's personality, if that kinda makes sense. Mii's were very basic, there was no overworld, and everyone still loved the game. But with Nintendo Switch Sports, the sportsmates are way too detailed for what is essentially a tech demo. The saturation has been turned all the way up, and all the sports take place within the soulless Spoko Square. Wuhu Island in Wii Sports Resort made the game feel so alive, and having every sport take place on the island made sense. Whereas Spoko Square is just a normal place that just so happens to have sports fields and arenas plonked into the middle of it. Whereas Spoko Square is just a normal place that just so happens to have sports fields and arenas plonked into the middle of it. Now, I could keep going on and on about how Nintendo Switch Sports just isn't very good, and how Nintendo could have just ported Wii Sports Resort over to the Switch, added a few more sports, give the game a HD coat of paint, and everyone would have been happier, and Nintendo would have made more money, but instead we're left with Nintendo Switch Sports, and the video's done. Bye.